New York City's mayor makes headlines for his legal issues. The 3 million resilient rodents have spurred local officials into some unconventional action.
New York has seen blackouts, blizzards, and even hurricanes. But nothing prepares you for the chaos that comes with millions of rats.
For too long in this city, our rat mitigation strategy has been extermination.
This isn't just an old city problem anymore. It's a full-blown invasion. And what started as a running joke is now a matter of public health, pride, and pure survival. The city that rats conquered. Something strange happened in 2003. 3 New York firehouses had to be evacuated, not because of flames or gas leaks, but because of rats. Hundreds of them, crawling through walls, chewing wires, even popping out of air vents like they owned the place. Firefighters fought them for nearly a year. Traps, poison, private pest control, and still lost. That's the shocking part. This wasn't some forgotten building in the Bronx. It was an active fire station, a place built to handle danger. Yet the rats won. That story wasn't an exception. It was a warning. Because in New York, rats aren't just pests. They're practically part of the ecosystem. They run under subway rails, dodge cars like pros, and stroll through Central Park like they pay rent. The city that never sleeps? Neither do they. Experts have tried for decades to count them, but that's like trying to count raindrops in a storm. Still, back in 2014, a statistician named Jonathan Arbuckle used City 311 complaint data to estimate around 2 million rats in New York. Fast forward to 2023, and new studies suggest that number is now closer to 3 million, almost 1 rat for every 3 residents. Some New Yorkers even joke the rats deserve their own borough by now. But the joke wears thin when you see the damage. These animals chew through car wiring, cause electrical fires, and spread diseases most people only read about in history books. Leptospirosis, typhus, even bacteria linked to the plague. In 2023 alone, city health officials confirmed a record 24 human cases of leptospirosis, all traced back to rats. And the cost isn't just in health, it's financial too. Between repairs, cleanup, and medical expenses, rats drain an estimated $27 billion a year from the U.S. economy. That's more than the annual budgets of several small nations. So why is New York their paradise? Simple: food, shelter, and time. The city's packed with overflowing trash cans, aging buildings full of cracks and crawl spaces, and miles of subway tunnels perfect for hiding. Each rat needs just about an ounce of food and water a day. Basically, 1 drop slice of pizza is enough to feed a small rat family for a week. By the time you see one, 50 more are watching from the shadows. And for decades, the city has thrown everything at them. Poison, traps, gas, even carbon monoxide fumigation. And every time, the rats adapt and come back stronger. It's been called a war. But lately, that war's changing. Because for the first time in decades, New York believes it might actually fight back. Not with brute force, but with a brand new kind of plan no one saw coming. Why killing them never worked. For years, New York tried to fight rats the same way it fights everything else, with force. Poison, traps, smoke, dry ice, gas. And for a while, it looked like those methods might work. But the rats adapted. They learned. Some even developed chemical resistance to the very poisons meant to kill them. By the time exterminators showed up, it was already too late. For every dozen they wiped out, another dozen were breeding beneath the streets. It was like trimming weeds that just grew back stronger. And here's the part most people don't realize. The rat problem isn't just about rodents. It's about people. Every overflowing trash bag, cracked sidewalk, and leaking sewer pipe gives rats a new lease on life. They're not surviving on scraps. They're thriving on neglect. Rats have become living proof of how aging infrastructure and poor sanitation feed one another. That's why infestations hit hardest in older, lower-income neighborhoods, places where basements flood, trash piles linger, and maintenance comes last. To a rat, that's opportunity. The city is a buffet, and some blocks are the all-you-can-eat section. Through the 2000s and 2010s, New York kept spending millions on short-term fixes. Private pest control companies were hired, rat-proof trash cans were installed, and experiments with carbon monoxide burrow treatments were launched. Yet every victory was temporary. A few months later, the scratching in the walls returned. And as the city learned the hard way, rats aren't just survivors, they're students. Research from urban biologists showed they memorize trap layouts, avoid human scents, and even communicate danger to other rats. One poisoned rat can teach an entire colony which bait to dodge. It's survival of the smartest. That's when experts inside City Hall began saying what no one wanted to admit. You can't kill your way out of this. Every time the city went on the offensive, the rats evolved faster. That realization changed everything. The real war wasn't underground. It was above ground, in how people handled food waste, maintained buildings, and stored garbage. Because until the city changed its own habits, no amount of poison would matter. And after years of frustration, a radical idea began to form. One that sounded less like pest control and more like population control. Maybe the solution wasn't killing more rats. Maybe it was stopping them before they were ever born. Crazy ideas that backfired. Before New York could roll out its new plan, city officials did what any desperate city would do. They looked around the world for inspiration. Surely someone must have figured out how to deal with a rat takeover, right? Well, turns out plenty had tried. And most of those solutions turned into full-blown disasters. Take Borneo in the 1950s. The island was battling a malaria outbreak, so authorities began spraying powerful insecticides to wipe out mosquitoes. It worked, but a little too well. The chemical killed off the local cats too, and with no predators left, the rats multiplied uncontrollably. They raided homes, destroyed crops, and spread disease faster than before. So what did the British Royal Air Force do? They actually dropped live cats from planes, each one packed neatly into a small crate attached to a parachute. And yes, that really happened. The operation, nicknamed Operation Cat Drop, made global headlines. For a short time, it worked. The rats vanished, crops recovered, and the crisis seemed over. But the lesson was unforgettable. Fix one imbalance in nature, and you often create another. Decades later, the same mistake played out again. This time on Astola Island, off the coast of Pakistan. Fishermen released a few cats to control the rats that were tearing through their fishing nets and nesting gear, but the plan backfired. The cats ignored the rats and went after easier prey, seabirds and turtle hatchlings. They became the island's top predators, devastating the fragile ecosystem. The rats, still there, doing just fine. And then there's Australia, where cats are anything but heroes. When European settlers brought them over in the late 1700s, they spread faster than anyone expected. Today, millions of feral cats roam the continent, killing an estimated 5 million native animals every single day. They've driven more than 20 species to extinction and caused billions in ecological losses. The pattern was obvious. Every time humans tried to fix nature by adding more predators, nature pushed back harder. Even in Jamaica and Hawaii, where mongooses were imported to hunt rats on sugar plantations, the plan collapsed. Mongooses are daytime hunters. Rats are nocturnal. They barely met. Instead, mongooses started hunting native birds, reptiles, and eggs, driving local species toward extinction. So, by the time New York considered similar biological fixes, the warning signs were impossible to ignore. cats, and mongooses might sound clever on paper, but in a dense vertical city like New York, they'd only cause more chaos. That realization changed everything. The city finally understood this wasn't about brute force or new predators. It was about science, coordination, and redesigning how the city itself worked. And that shift in thinking paved the way for something entirely new. A modern, data-driven war against the rats, led by a woman who would soon become famous as New York's first rat czar. Birth of a new plan. After years of failed experiments, global cautionary tales, and half-hearted extermination attempts, New York finally accepted one hard truth: there's no quick fix. If this city was going to win, it needed to change how it fought, not just what it fought with. That's when City Hall decided to do something no other American city had ever done: declare a full-scale war on rats, one built on science, coordination, and leadership. And in 2023, that plan got a face. Kathleen Karate, the city's first ever director of rodent mitigation, better known as the Rat Czar. Now, the title might sound like a punchline, but the mission wasn't. Karate wasn't some symbolic hire. She had a background in biology and urban sustainability and had already led major pest reduction efforts inside the city's Department of Education, where she oversaw cleanup programs in more than 100 public schools. She understood the problem from the ground up, literally. Overflowing bins, unsealed trash, and neglected basements were breeding grounds she'd been tackling for years. When Mayor Eric Adams introduced her, he made one thing clear: the rats don't run this city, we do. Behind the headline quote was a coordinated strategy. Karate's job was to unite agencies that had been working in silos for decades: sanitation, parks, health, housing, and education, and turn them into a single, synchronized front. Her first major move was a $3.5 million pilot project in Harlem, officially called the Harlem Rat Mitigation Zone. This wasn't another extermination stunt. It was a controlled experiment in long-term management. The project covered 28 public housing properties, 73 park sites, and nearly 70 schools, making it one of the largest anti-rodent initiatives in city history. Teams were dispatched to inspect buildings, seal burrows, and reinforce infrastructure. In public housing basements, crews poured rat slabs, thick layers of concrete designed to block burrowing. Parks and sidewalks were cleaned and re-landscaped, removing the loose soil where rats nested. But the real innovation came from technology and training. Crews began using CO2 fumigation machines, motion sensors to track rat activity, and even rat academies, public workshops that taught residents how to defend their own neighborhoods through smarter trash management. Karate's philosophy was simple: you don't win by killing more rats. You win by removing what helps them live. Rats aren't just a sanitation issue, she said. They're a symptom of how the city functions, or doesn't. This was more than pest control. It was a shift in mindset, from extermination to prevention. And as the city adjusted to this new strategy, another idea started gaining traction. One that sounded strange at first, even laughable, but would soon become the most talked about move in New York's war on rats: a plan to control them before they were ever born. The Rat Czar's arsenal. Once the plan was in motion, Karate knew this wasn't about chasing rats. It was about outsmarting them. The old playbook was useless. What New York needed now was a coordinated army with new tools, new tech, and a mindset built on prevention rather than panic. Her first move was to unite the city's fractured departments. For decades, everyone had worked in isolation. Sanitation handled trash, health dealt with infestations, housing patched the damage, and parks tried to keep public spaces clean. But rats don't respect bureaucratic boundaries. They move wherever there's food, warmth, or garbage. Karate's mission was to make sure the city moved, just as fast. So, agencies that rarely talk to each other, the Department of Sanitation, DSNY, Department of Health, DOHMH, Parks and Recreation, NYCHA Housing, and even public schools were suddenly operating under one synchronized plan. Each had a job, each had accountability. Then came the hardware. This wasn't about scattering a few traps. This was an urban warfare toolkit. Teams deployed CO2 fumigation machines that pumped gas into burrows, killing rats without poison. They tested rat ice, dry carbon dioxide pellets that froze pests underground. Parks workers wrapped soil beds and basements in wire mesh and stone barriers, closing off breeding grounds. In public housing basements, crews poured thick concrete rat slabs, sealing off the earthen floors that had served as underground highways for generations. It wasn't glamorous, but it worked. The rats had fewer places to dig, fewer cracks to exploit. Karate's campaign also expanded to the city's street tree beds, one of rats' favorite hiding spots. With an $877,000 investment, New York hired 12 full-time staff to inspect, seal, and clean over 600,000 tree beds citywide. It was one of the first times in city history that those spaces were treated as part of rodent control. But the most important weapon wasn't chemical or mechanical. It was human. The city launched rat academies, public workshops where landlords, superintendents, and residents learned how to cut off a rat survival chain, sealed garbage, clean curbs, and quick 311 reporting. Because karate knew that even the best traps were useless if people kept feeding the problem through carelessness. And for the first time, the data started shifting. Within months, 311 rat complaints dropped in pilot zones. Streets looked cleaner. Trash sat out for fewer hours. The conversation around sanitation started to change. Not overnight, but noticeably. Karate summed it up simply. You can't just kill rats. You have to make the city unwelcome to them. But while New York's cleanup army worked above ground, scientists were testing something far stranger below. A breakthrough that sounded more like science fiction than city policy. For the first time, New York wasn't just fighting rats with traps. It was fighting them with birth control. Operation Birth Control. The idea sounded absurd at first. Birth control for rats. Even lifelong New Yorkers laughed. But to the people leading this new offensive, it wasn't a punchline. It was science. For decades, the city had thrown everything at its rodents: poison, traps, gas, dry ice. Yet somehow, the population always bounced back. Why? Because rats reproduce like wildfire. A single breeding pair can produce up to 15,000 descendants in a single year. So unless the breeding cycle itself was cut off, every extermination campaign was just a temporary pause between generations. That's where the new approach came in. Instead of killing them, researchers decided to make them stop multiplying. In early 2024, the New York City Council introduced a pilot program to test rat contraceptives, small, salty pellets designed to sterilize both males and females. Coated with fat and flavor, they're basically a 5-star snack for rats. And unlike poison, they don't harm pets, wildlife, or soil. The concept wasn't entirely new. New York had actually tried similar experiments before, first in the 1960s and later in the 2010s, but the science wasn't there yet. The formulas broke down too fast, the bait wasn't appealing, and the city eventually gave up. This time, things were different. The new contraceptive, called Contrapest, was created by biologist Dr. Loretta Mayer. It had already shown strong results in cities like Boston, Columbus, and Hartford. The compound targets ovarian function in females and disrupts sperm production in males, meaning smaller litters, slower growth, and a real chance to contain the population instead of constantly chasing it. The pilot, championed by Councilman Sean Abreu, would run inside official rat mitigation zones covering at least 10 city blocks. His reasoning was blunt. We can't just fight rats. We have to outthink them. This is shock and awe rodent control. But there was another reason this plan mattered. No poison. That might sound minor, but for New York's wildlife, it was a turning point. The tragic death of Flaco the owl, the beloved Central Park escapee found with lethal levels of rat poison in his system, changed public opinion overnight. People realized the city's war on rats was also killing the very predators that kept them in check. With contraceptives, that risk vanished. The bait didn't travel up the food chain, and the rats didn't die underground. They simply stopped reproducing. Skeptics still weren't convinced. Rats are clever, and scaling contraception across millions of them would take time, persistence, and patience. But for the first time in decades, New York wasn't reacting. It was strategizing. And as the birth control trials rolled out beneath the streets, another front in the war was forming above them. A hands-on operation that would take the fight straight to where the rats roam every night. The city's sidewalks and tree-lined streets. New armies on the ground. While scientists were working on sterilizing the rats from the inside, the city was also building a new army to hit them from the outside, the kind that wears reflective vests instead of lab coats. Mayor Eric Adams called it a new era of urban pest management. The idea was simple. If you want to win a war, you need boots on the ground, or, in this case, inspectors in the streets. So the city set aside about $877,000 in permanent funding to form specialized rat mitigation teams, full-time crews trained to target one of the rats' favorite hideouts, street tree beds. Those small patches of soil beneath city trees, the ones you pass without a glance, turned out to be prime real estate for rodents. Warm soil, food scraps close by, and easy access to burrow in peace. Until now, no city agency was directly responsible for those spaces. That changed fast. The new teams, operating under the Department of Parks and Recreation with guidance from the Rat Czar's office, began inspecting, sealing, and cleaning more than 600,000 tree beds across all 5 boroughs. Each crew blended exterminators, maintenance staff, and even urban foresters. Together, they weren't just fighting pests, they were protecting the city's green spaces. Their tools were strictly non-toxic: wire mesh barriers, CO2 fumigation units, soil hardening compounds, and landscape fabrics designed to block burrows before they formed. And here's what made this plan different. It wasn't just cleanup, it was consistency. Every tree bed in targeted zones would now be inspected on a schedule, and any burrows found were immediately filled, sealed, or treated. Before this, those spaces might have gone unchecked for years. Now there was structure and accountability. Within months, the results spoke for themselves. 311 rat complaints dropped in multiple neighborhoods. Streets looked cleaner. Corners that once piled high with garbage stayed clear longer. The city even launched neighborhood workshops, cheekily named Rat Pack Meetups, where residents learned how to manage waste and report burrows early. Local businesses joined in too, adopting trash containerization systems and the city's new composting schedule that kept black bags off sidewalks overnight. The message was simple. If rats can't find dinner, they can't stay. As the team swept through borough after borough, New York's war on rats finally started to feel organized. For once, it wasn't chaos versus chaos. It was structure versus survival. But while the new army was making visible progress above ground, the toughest battlefield was still psychological. Because in a city famous for its sarcasm and skepticism, not everyone believed this war could actually be won. A war of perception. Even as the city's crews worked day and night, there was another battle brewing. Not in the streets, but in the public's mind. Because if there's one thing New Yorkers are famous for, it's skepticism. When Mayor Adams announced the appointment of a rat czar, the internet had a field day. Memes popped up overnight. People joked about rat armies and furry diplomats. Late-night hosts had their fun, and for a while, it felt like New York was laughing its way through yet another doomed plan. But the laughter didn't last. As the months went by, something started to shift. The joke wasn't as funny when residents saw fewer rats darting across sidewalks or fewer trash bags being ripped open overnight. Slowly, people realized this wasn't the same old extermination campaign. This was coordination, strategy, and measurable progress. Still, the city's history with rats made it hard to trust. New Yorkers had seen too many wars on rats come and go. Each one launched with big promises and bold headlines, only to fade quietly when things got complicated. So naturally, the idea of rat birth control and tree bed patrols sounded like wishful thinking. But Karate's approach was different. It wasn't about flashy exterminations or quick victories. It was about changing behavior. Citywide, cleaner curbs, sealed trash bins, shorter garbage hours, and better education. The kind of fixes that don't make headlines, but make a difference. And soon, even the data backed it up. By the end of the first phase, rat sightings reported to 311 began dropping across targeted zones. Residents noticed it. Businesses started supporting the new trash policies instead of complaining about them. The Rat Czar title that once sounded like a gimmick was slowly becoming a symbol of results. In a way, it mirrored New York's own personality. Loud, mocked at first, but relentless when it matters. Still, Karate never claimed victory. "You don't eliminate rats," she said. "You outsmart them." And that line stuck with people. It wasn't just about rodents anymore. It was about discipline, habit, and pride in how the city looked and lived. So, as the memes faded and the cleanup continued, one thing became clear. This wasn't a joke anymore. The city had gone from laughing about its rat problem to finally doing something about it. But after everything, decades of infestation, billions in losses, and a whole new system in place, the question remained. Can New York actually win? Can New York actually beat the rats? After all the headlines, the memes, and the billions spent on traps, teams, and tech, one question still hangs over New York. Can the city actually beat the rats? The truth is, not completely. But for the first time in decades, it's not about total victory. It's about control. Experts say that as long as there's food, warmth, and shelter, rats will always find a way to survive. They've been here since the earliest human cities, and they've outlived wars, pandemics, and every poison we've ever invented. But what's changing now isn't the rats, it's us. New York has finally learned that extermination alone doesn't work. You can't fight biology with brute force. You fight it with structure, strategy, and discipline. And the early signs are promising. In target zones like Harlem, rat sightings have already dropped. But progress like this is fragile. The rats haven't disappeared. They've simply been pushed back. Every victory has to be maintained day after day, because the moment the city lets its guard down, the problem surges back. That's why this battle has become about more than pest control. It's about behavior. It's about how New Yorkers handle their waste, how agencies coordinate, and how neighborhoods take responsibility for their own streets. For the first time, it's not just City Hall versus the rats. It's the whole city. And that might be the most powerful shift of all. For decades, New Yorkers treated rats like an inside joke, a part of city life you just had to accept. But now, people are reporting infestations faster, following sanitation rules, even joining cleanup programs and rat pack community events. The war on rats has evolved into something bigger, a movement to reclaim the city itself. No one's pretending the rats will vanish overnight. They're too smart, too stubborn, and too woven into the city's fabric. But for once, The balance of power is shifting. New York isn't running from its rodents anymore. It's redesigning itself to keep them out. So maybe this isn't a story about victory. Maybe it's about persistence. The rats aren't gone. But the city that once laughed at the idea of a rat czar, it's not laughing anymore. If this one pulled you in, drop a like, share it with a friend, and hit subscribe. We've got more eye-opening stories coming, the kind that make you question what's really going on around us.